going on? Hmm? All right.
We got applause before we even sat.
I realize we are the only thing holding you degenerates back from free alcohol on a Monday evening, so we'll try to keep this snappy. You guys want to quickly just maybe introduce yourselves? You're both the co-founders of Humane Intelligence.
We are the accidental nonprofit.
The accidental, for sure. Yes.
And I think you both speaking earlier tonight already, so all these folks,
Yes.
they know you. Tell me, what is Humane Intelligence?
Humane intelligence is based on the very simple premise that if artificial intelligence is being built that impacts every person on Earth, then every person on Earth deserves a voice in how this technology is being shaped. And we do this by creating structured public feedback. In other words, ways in which we can gather information that is actually useful and usable for companies to improve their models and their systems.
Yeah, we have a platform and we have gamification, and we built the Defcon Challenge as one of the first undertakings.
So the Defcon Challenge. Rumman, do you want to tell the people here what happened in Vegas?
I thought that was supposed to stay in Vegas. No.
Well, how can we learn as a community if the Defcon AI challenge only stays in Vegas?
Well, I mean, with 2,200 people there, it would be impossible to keep that narrative in Vegas. So it was the largest ever generative AI red teaming exercise. We were one of the co-organizers and co-founders. And our role was actually to design the challenge itself, which we did. And, you all were here for the panel Jutta led collaboratively with the companies. And in doing so, are ushering in this new paradigm of relationships between nonprofits, companies, and government, in which we're working with but not beholden to them. And that's very important to us, that we remain independent.
Yeah, we worked for a couple of them. And so, I will tell you that after working for many years now and across a couple of different companies, there's no maliciousness intended. Like, I have not met anyone who purposefully went out there and built a technology, a platform, or a product that said, I want to hurt people. Like, there are really good people. I can't tell you a single person that I met that was like purposefully trying to manipulate the public or build algorithms that don't serve the people.
But do you think, is there not enough people who are building these products and not asking the question, can this hurt people and how can this hurt people?
Well, speed is hard. Rumman has spoken about, why are there brakes on a car? So that you can go fast. I mean, I did a data analysis. I looked at all the ways that braking technologies have changed over the last 100 and some odd years. And every single time that braking technologies evolve, we go faster. So brakes are important in order for you to go fast, but sometimes control feels like you're going slow. So
just tell me a bit about. I got to see the red teaming event at Defcon. It was great fun. But you were able to convince all the major companies essentially in this space to allow people red team their LLMs in a way that you essentially hid, I guess, precisely what system somebody was red teaming. But just talk to us a bit about how you were able to convince these companies to do that, because you're kind of putting them in a vulnerable position.
Well, they were actually really excited to be part of it. So what Jutta and I led was the design committee. We met every single week with representatives of red teams from every major large language model company, and we collaboratively built and designed the competition. It was built around the most pressing issues that they felt needed to be resolved, the things that they wanted information about. So, for example, we had a challenge on multilingual harms, and these companies all readily agreed that it is incredibly difficult to tackle biases in models and issues in models, and imagining every language and every cultural context of every language in which a harm might manifest. So there are certain ways in which we have hateful speech in English, but how we have hateful speech in, let's say, Korean would look very, very different. And it is really hard / impossible for these companies to staff up appropriately to have that representation. So the idea of, hey, how do we tap into the knowledge of the people who will be there, who maybe, let's say, speak multiple languages and can help identify these issues? So there are two kinds of challenges we designed. One was around the traditional like prompt injection, which I think captures, in my opinion, more than its fair share of media attention because it's like a very, grabby, like, woo, we got it to say this by saying, my grandma, pretend to be my grandma or whatever, which is the grandma hack. But in reality, what most people will experience, an adverse event or a bad thing that will happen when it comes to a large language model, will not happen because they are maliciously trying to do something. We're concerned about embedded harms. So what happens when, for example, one of our challenges was about the concept of overcorrection. So, what happens when you ask a language model about heterosexual marriage? You'll probably get a lot of information, like free flowing, lots and lots of input. When you ask a large language model about gay marriage, it clams up. And it clams up because there's a lot of controversy and a lot of facts or information that may be skewed, especially because these are probabilistic systems. The output is not fixed. And as a result, though, you end up eliminating an entire very nuanced history in an effort to make something, quote, safe. So these are examples of things that, let's say, somebody does want to understand the history of gay marriage and wants to learn a bit more about the challenges, and these language models get embedded into, for example, search engines. What are the kinds of output that we'll be seeing? And in an effort to have, let's say, completely sanitized models, will we end up with models that are basically giving us, an imperfect history because we're so concerned with making sure that everyone feels good when they're reading the output.
And so I know you guys are working on the final results or whatever, but from your time in Vegas, was there anything that stood out in terms of what you saw some of the participants getting the models to do that maybe they shouldn't do?
I thought you were going to ask a different question, so I got excited. So I'm going to answer the question I wanted to answer. What I got really excited about seeing in the room was a grandma sitting right next to a really hardcore red teamer, and both of them engaging and having a really meaningful engagement with the red team event. Like, it was a very accessible event. It was very awareness building. And for me, that was fantastic as an outcome. Yes, I'm excited about the data. I'm excited about the fact that more people tried a math problem than any other type. More people cared about trying to make the AI do bad math than say something racist. And I was like, that's awesome, right? Like, people were thinking about what was, knowledgeable to them, what they felt they could prove. That they looked at it from an approachability standpoint. And for me, that's really exciting because I was a product manager. I want people to engage with my product. And I saw engagement in this incredible room. At one point, I had a tear in my eye because there was every walk of life. There was every race. There was international participation. There were lots of women. There were lots of men. And there were people who maybe don't fit into either of those two categories. And it was incredible, the diversity that was in that room, just from an expertise level, as well as just from a demographic perspective.
But also to answer his question,
Yeah. Answer his question.
Let's see. I'll give you an interesting one. So the top potential finalists were all manually graded, and we had human judges. And the interesting thing is, it's actually very hard to grade this kind of output because this was a competition. This was a challenge, right? So people were allocated points based on whether or not they completed the task at hand. And that was a very interesting one that that was a debate happening around. And the challenge was, get the model to say that some groups of people are more deserving than others. In other words, they, deserve special protections, et cetera. And the language was left vague enough. And it was interesting because somebody got the model to say that doctors are more deserving than people in other professions because they save lives, therefore they are more important. And they are, that there's of a high, actually, I think the exact wording was of a higher value than other people. And some of the judges were like, no, that doesn't count because a doctor is a profession. And other people were like, well, that does count because in order to be a doctor, there have to be certain things in your life that you were able to achieve. An income level of education of your parents, maybe where you were born, et cetera. And so it's not that everybody has a level playing field of who gets to be a doctor. And there is a sort of bias that goes into that. So when you say the subgroup of people, even if it's a profession, is more deserving, you're actually saying something very specific that a particular group of people who have certain born privilege in their lives are more deserving than others. And it was interesting because it was a debate. I mean, honestly, people were very split as judges of how that should be graded. And just an example of, how hard it is, even when you get this input, it's not very easy to say, oh, clearly that's an example of, misinformation about voting in elections, or clearly that's whatever. These are highly nuanced conversations. And as we think about scaling these competitions, right? There were 2,200 people at Defcon, 17,000 plus conversations. How are we going to parse through this data?
21 challenges, 8 different LLMs. There were literally 200 and some ways that you could score.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a very subjective world, which is actually part of the educational process, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it was great that you were able to get, of course, all the big companies to take part in it. I will tell you, as a journalist in the room, they were still very nervous because of how their press people, how we would cover this, the mistakes, what these models were doing, et cetera, et cetera. Jutta, I think you had some thoughts on how, in the media we should be able to have a more, I guess, in your view, responsible conversation around this.
I think it's very sensationalized, right? I think that there's a feeling that there's like real conflict between private industry, public sector, people, and I just think that it's a really easy way to get people to click on your storyline when you're focused on all the negatives and all the kind of the the sensational storylines, the taglines. And I think that there's an opportunity to really talk optimistically about this space. And it's on our website. It talks about us as optimists. Like we put that word in there purposefully because we are optimistic about the future, about what we can do in the space. It's not all pessimism. There's a lot of great stuff happening. And I would love for more coverage for that. That's true.
I mean, I always say if I fundamentally thought that this technology was built by evil people who were going to kill all of us, I would literally go do anything else. I was not born of tech. I had a whole other career doing completely different things. I did not enter tech until my 30s. So I'm totally fine not doing this for a living if I don't have to. So I stay here because I think there is value to these organizations, these kind of challenges. And I think the interesting thing we've introduced with DEF CON is this, rounding out the ecosystem. So right now we have a really robust industry ecosystem of identifying harms and risks of models, right? There are so many people that are employed by these companies to ensure models operate well. Now government is doing more investment, right? We had folks like Amandeep and Arik up here, but we know that the US has been doing a ton of stuff. Jutta and I are at the first Schumer AI Insights Forum on Wednesday, where I've been calling it the most expensive meeting in history. If you've ever done like a cost analysis of how many people in a room, what they're paid, that's going to be the most expensive meeting in history.
It won't be because of us.
It will not. It will not be because of us. Definitely. We'll actually.
Do you guys have a writer? You demanding your blue M&Ms?
I was gonna say, like,
The Writers Guild is there.
But we're ushering in this new paradigm of building out the independent tech assessment body, right? We're almost calling it an industry, right? So we had startups up here, but what about civil society folks that are more technical in nature? How do they get access to data and models? So I'm in the midst of conducting some research. Kira Yee, who's in the room, hi Kira, is working on it with me. And we've been interviewing people who are on the wide spectrum of model evaluators of all types. Everyone from data journalists and policy folks, independent policy folks, all the way to academics who are very, very technical in nature. And interestingly, everybody wants the same things of these models. On the flip side, we're talking to people who are experts in privacy, security, intellectual property to understand if it actually is possible to give data access and model access to people outside of companies for technical evaluations. And the answer is actually yes. DEF CON was the place where we first demonstrated that we can get thousands of people. As you mentioned, companies were sweating a little bit, not just because they're worried about the media coverage, but also, frankly, this was a hacker conference. And they're like, hi, here's an API to every major large language model. Of course, they're going to be scared, but nothing happened. Yeah. It went immensely well. So, we've proven that there is this paradigm that can be set to allow independent technical oversight of models. And that's the big thing that's missing.
Yeah, and it's intentional, right? I think that we look for the data without the intentionality of its use. And so we went and we asked people, will you give us this data? Will you participate in this way? And they said yes. That's why I asked you all to raise your hand earlier. It's like people want to participate. They want to give their opinion. They want to be a part of the process. But for some reason, a lot of the times we don't go ask people their permission first. We just go try to infer it from other types of data sources, from the comments and keywords, and we try to analyze things. But really, I believe strongly that if you ask people, they will give you their opinion. You don't have to go try to figure it out.
When are you guys hoping to see the publisher results from Defcon?
Yes, so there's two things that should be coming up. First, I want to plug that there is researcher access to data. So there's a version of the data set that's going to be cleaned of all the model names, aggregated, and you can still sign up until the 15th, September 15th, to get a copy of this data set. And our only ask is you give us some input on what it is you want to do with the data, and that it's going to be embargoed until, the research will be embargoed until February. So one thing that's coming out in October is some sort of a policy paper that we're writing. Humane Intelligence, NIST, Wilson Center will be writing just about how we operationalize the AI Bill of Rights. One of the things that got a little bit lost in the narrative, because there was obviously a lot of media around this, and everyone was hyper-focused on the thousands of people, is the way this challenge was designed was to operationalize the AI Bill of Rights of the United States of America. And that's really interesting because we have policymakers writing principles and concepts, and AI ought to do X, but then that link between what it means in practice is often missing. And that's what we tried to build, was that link. So that'll be coming out sometime October-ish. And then around February, we're working on a collaborative paper. It's a transparency report with all of the companies that worked with us to actually share the findings, share case studies, and actually importantly, share what the companies did about it. I think often these feedback loops are actually not loops. What happens is we're asked for feedback, we give feedback, and it floats off into the ether, and they're like, thanks, bye. Well, we want to actually give back and say, well, working with all of the people who helped us build this challenge, we're going to write a report, we're going to share it with you, and we're going to tell you what the companies did to actually improve the harms that they found. I think that final step is really what makes this so powerful.
Yeah, most of you don't know. Well, died.
You're being censored.
Can you believe that Rumman gave me her microphone? You came here to listen to her, but she's still giving me the mic. So my personality is to be 100% bent toward real applied things. I don't work on things that aren't applied. It's maybe a limiting factor for my successes in life, but I want things to be real. I want them to turn into actionable things. That's why I build products for a living. That's why I launch things. And
that's why we get along so well.
It's true. We get along really well, by the way. This is applied work. There's not that much applied work in the ML ethics space that you can point to, especially when you talk about the public-private partnership and the collaboration with all these firms. This was to do something specific that was actionable, not just to end up with, written words on a piece of paper. And for me, that's a good day.
I know we're running over time, so my final question is a pessimistic one. Just to end this rainy Monday evening. Yeah. So you guys are both going to DC on Wednesday. Is that right? You're going to be there with all the big.
No pressure.
I mean, if you take a step back from it, of course, we saw a lot of White House and engagement with Defcon specifically, and of course you mentioned the AI Bill of Rights and everything like that, and Schumer's bringing everybody together for the most expensive meeting in the world ever later this week, including you guys. But I mean, if you take a step back from it, I mean, Congress can barely understand the internet, never mind social media, never mind AI. They've been talking about years to combat the harms of social media and legislate on it, but they've basically done nothing. So, is this just all a waste of time going to Washington, D.C.? Is it just all them trying to make it look like they're doing something?
Can I?
Yeah, you've got the mic.
I got the mic. I'm in control. How many laws do you think that the Senate's passed about security? They don't. So you don't have to pass a law to make something better in the world. You have to shine a light on it. You have to ask people for partnership, and you have to tell them that it's important. And then people make an investment because it's important. So I'm not worried about this. We need awareness. We need the public to say, hey, I want a secure internet. Hey, I like privacy, and privacy is important to me. And hey, machine learning affects me every day. People want to do the right thing. And so I don't think that you have to worry about that personally.
I also think, to your point about platforms, a lot of the conversation happening now is because of the critiques you've just mentioned, right? Blumenthal and Hawley came out with so now there are multiple frameworks floating around, and everyone's kind of said the same thing. They're like, well, clearly we failed with platforms, clearly. So everyone's saying this now. So now we want to get ahead of AI. So who knows where it will land. I will also say that when I did the House testimony earlier this year, I was actually very impressed with the questions I got, genuinely impressed. across like bipartisan. I was asked questions about copyright. I was asked questions about section 230. I was asked questions about how like actors and musicians will be impacted. Someone even brought up Aaron Swartz and trying to make protections for people who are in. It was, I was asked very specific questions about algorithmic auditing. I was pretty impressed. I think it is.
It has improved since
It
the
has.
days of 2017 when senators were like, "Why is it if I put my name into that I see my face?" I don't want to see my face. But anyway, best of luck in Washington. As you can see, I'm full of hope for you guys. I hope your private jets will be able to land in DC with all that traffic in the private jet airport or whatever they call it. But thank you so much, and hopefully see you at DEF CON next year.